Hey everyone, I'm Stacy DiNardo, Director of Communications here at Christ Community Chapel, and I'm sitting here with our founding pastor, Dr. Jim College.
Welcome. Hey everybody, good to be with you.
And we're going to unpack today a Q&A with CCC questions. So every week, people submit questions either by text or by email. And every week we're going to be choosing one or maybe a few questions to answer here in a video format. We want to create a space for people to be able to ask questions and then for us to just respond. Everybody has questions about God, spirituality, faith, morality, all sorts of things. And we just feel it's really important to be able to provide that space to answer those. So we'll give you instructions at the end as to how you can submit those questions. But for now, we'll jump right in.
Excellent.
Are you ready? Okay, we got a good one this week. And here it was submitted just last week, and it says, when it comes to women preaching, particularly in a church setting, how would you interpret 1 Timothy 2, 8 through 12? And let me read that passage. It says, I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. Likewise, also that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness with good works. Let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. There you go.
It's a good one.
It is a good one.
It comes up a lot. And I think the thing we have to look at, first of all, is the cultural context. And whenever you look at a Bible passage, you have to look for two things. First, you have to look for the particular. In other words, this was written within a particular cultural context.
Okay.
Timothy, young Timothy, was pastoring in the city of Ephesus. And Paul is writing to him with instruction for the church, how it's led, how to carry out in order. It's similar to what he wrote to Titus, and they're in some ways almost identical. But right here, we find this passage that I think stirs up all kind of emotions in both men and women. And so what I want to do, I want to simply look at it, understanding that Paul is writing to a young pastor.
Okay.
And talking about order within the church. Now, having said that, it's interesting that right away we move to these words in verse 11. With all submissiveness, I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but she's to remain quiet. Here's what we forget to look at. I mean, we read it, but we forget to look at it, and that is, let a woman learn. Let a woman learn. Now, implied in all of that is the idea of gaining a theological foundation in order, I believe, to carry out the Great Commission of Matthew 28. Because the Great Commission is to do what? To go into all the world, make disciples, now, and it's not gender specific. Make disciples, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always. Now, Jesus is sending out, he's giving the marching orders to the church in order to instruct. So let's set that in concept.
Okay.
Here we have this command that we are to make disciples. So whether you're male or female, you are to be a disciple and you are to make disciples. Now, before I go back to 1 Timothy, let me quickly, and we don't have time in this little segment, but in 1 Corinthians 11, with all the really interesting, difficult stuff of head coverings and all this other kind of stuff, there is this instruction that women are to pray and prophesy. Now, how can the man, the Apostle Paul, who many would say is anti-woman in 1 Timothy, instruct in 1 Corinthians, with all the correction that was going on in the church of Corinth, that women are to pray and prophesy. In fact, it is God honoring, whether you look at, I think it's verse 4 or 5 in chapter 11, or you go to chapter 14 and look at it, it's around 15 or 16. Same kind of thing.
Okay.
That it edifies the entire body.
Wow.
Okay, so obviously we see women having this function of at least praying and prophesying.
Yeah.
But going back to this, let them learn. Let them learn so that they develop a strong theological background, so they can understand how they can make disciples. Implied then in that is not only are they to be taught, to learn,
Right.
but they are to teach. And there are a number of opportunities for that to take place within the local church. But here's what it comes down to when we come back to 1 Timothy chapter 2, which is the whole instruction about within this function of the church. And it comes down to, let's call it function and office or activity and authority.
Okay.
What Paul is addressing here is the office or the authority of the local pastor. The local pastor, a woman is not to usurp that. And that gets back into the 1 Corinthians 11 and headship and all that kind of stuff. But let me give you an example. We all know, and perhaps most of you viewing this understand that Joe Coffey is the lead pastor here at Christ Community Chapel. And with that office, he has authority to set vision and to teach. But more importantly, he shepherds, he oversees. So there's a weight
Yeah.
that rests on him. And so he fills this office that God has ordained that is to be led by qualified men or a man within the church. So if Joe invites someone to speak, a traveling evangelist or a Bible teacher, again, whether male or female, that person doesn't have the authority or the weight of the local pastor. In our case, Pastor Joe Coffey. So they don't carry the responsibility that's laid out in Hebrews 13, verse 17, I believe it is, that says, obey your leaders,
Yeah.
for they have the responsibility to watch over your souls. Joe has that responsibility.
Right.
Now, fortunately, he has a qualified staff of pastors who have that role, but he is the ultimate authority. God is ordained
Right.
here with elders that he is accountable to. But anybody could come in, they can speak. They don't have the weight of caring for this. They come in under the authority of Pastor Coffey. So back to 1 Timothy chapter 2. All Paul's saying is, in this structure of the church, there is a, if I may, a hierarchy.
Yeah.
An ecclesiastical or a church hierarchy that must be followed because it is God ordained. It is not restricting a woman or a man from teaching in a variety of settings, but rather that final authority under biblical absolutes and elder guided polity. That pastor carries out his role and then can oversee teachers, evangelists, or whoever is conveying the full counsel of God in this kind of setting. So I hope that helps
Wow.
answer the question.
That was great. I mean, thank you so much. That taught me a whole lot.
Good.
And went through so many different passages too to kind of unpack and explain and give such context to that. So thank you so much for that.
Welcome.
So if you have a question this week, I would just encourage you to go ahead and text that or email that to us. Just below this video, you'll see in the description exactly how you can do that. And we look forward to seeing your questions come on in and then finding a couple of those to answer next week. So watch for it and we'll see you again. Thanks.